I'm the previous chair of the Parliamentary Energy Commission. I'm Malatya MP. We gathered here in this blue hall, whereas other halls are hosting other discussions. Thank you very much for representing us and attending here.
Ve kendi adıma bizi tercih ettiğiniz için size teşekkür ediyorum ve hoş geldiniz diyorum.
Our panelists are Selahattin Özbek,
Sabahattin Özbey bakanlığımızı temsilen
Associate Professor Dr. Sedat Çelikdoğan, who is specialized in manufacturing,
üstadımız
Kerem Paksoy, who is involved in the supply part of the process,
paylaşacağımız
Cem Yalçın, who is a total expert,
ülke soyulmuş, kılıç yetmez diye kanadından şeyine kadar, diskine kadar her şeye soyulmuş ve bu işin öncüleri
and finally Zerrin Touch, who will provide us with technical information about wind power generators.
jeneratörünün parçalarıyla ilgili, teknik bilgileriyle ilgili bize bir sunum yapacaklar.
We'd like to conduct this session in an interactive way, because in each session we should to come up with a conclusion that can be helpful both for the industry and the country. We should come up with demands and allocate roles both on the parliament and the industry as well as the government. That's how we can proceed from now on throughout other congresses and track our performance.
Evet, biz bunları konuşmuştuk ve bu problemleri de bölüşmüştük. Şu kadar kısmını yapabildik, bu kadar kısmını yapamadık diye tartışıyor olmamız lazım ki bu toplantılarda...
I know you might want to ask questions. Unlike conventional sessions, you are welcome to ask questions anytime. You don't need to wait till the end of the session. We'd like to see you being quite participatory in this process. Just consider him as a sincere and friendly working environment. Let's go out our boundaries.
Sıcak aile ortamında, sıcak bir çalışma ortamı gibi bu sunumu düşünüyoruz. Arkadaşlarımız öyle uygun gördüler, öyle düşündük. Yoksa her birimiz birer sunum yapacağız. Sonunda da kağıtlara yazılı sorular alacağız. Onlara da bir kısmına cevap vereceğiz, bir kısmına vermeyeceğiz. Biraz klasiğin dışına çıkalım. Birçoğumuz burayı tercih ettiğine göre bu işin imalat kısmı, üretim kısmı, yapım kısmında uzman olan ve meraklı olan arkadaşlarımız olduğumuzu biliyor. Dolayısıyla programımız seyir itibariyle de ilk sözü.
I'm giving the floor to Sabahattin Bey.
Çünkü biz kanunu yaparken
while we were working on the law, we knew that we had a chaotic environment for energy, but each chaotic environment brings with it its own advantages. That's why we wanted to provide some advantages to local investors, especially those investors who use domestic materials. Let's listen to our first panelist first, who will talk about the application processes. Then we will receive your questions.
Sorularınız da olursa direkt katılımcılardan da soruları olan olursa onlara da söz verelim ve Sabahattin Bey ilk olarak dinleyelim. Buyurun.
Can you also introduce yourself briefly?
Tanıtırsanız sevinirim.
Sayın Başkan, teşekkür ediyorum. Değerli katılımcılar, hepinizi saygıyla selamlıyorum.
I am working at the General Directorate for Renewable Energy, head of the Renewable Energy Office. I'd like to first touch upon the renewable energy law, and we have released a regulation
5346 sayılı Yenilenebilir Enerji Kanunu. Bu kanunun ilgili maddesi gereği çıkartılan bir yönetmeliğimiz var.
The first was published in 2010 and it didn't work out. That's why it went through a revision in 2012 in collaboration with the industry and giving a heed to the opinions of the representatives. Even after 2012, we couldn't give support to investors who were using domestic products due to some issues that we mistakenly ignored. In the end, in 2013, we released another amended version of the regulation, which now allows the investors, both in terms of projects and the bureaucratic procedures for subsidies. We received 12 applications this year. 2 of them was regarding the power plants which weren't yet commissioned. However, the regulation was applicable to the power plants which were under operation for subsidies. That's why we had to disqualify the 2 applications. Another 2 applications were also disregarded due to the absence of some official documents, and the remaining 18 were accepted, later announced to EMRA. Only one of the accepted applications was about a hydroelectric power plant, and its products were purchased from Temsan, and the other 17 applications were regarding wind energy, wind power plants. They are subsidized in terms of towers and blades. We might go through some more revisions, but as a bureaucrat, revising a regulation each year is not something convenient. But this is what happens. The more you act in compliance with the regulation, the more you bump into problems, the more you identify insufficiencies within the regulation. Hydroelectricity power plants were subsidized in terms of turbines and generators. This year we only got an application from Temsan, even though there are other companies operating in this field. The total power of these power plants which received acceptance is 900 megawatts. Accordingly, a wind power plant with a totally domestic tower and blade will receive a 1.2 cents per kilowatt hours. EMRA expected us to inform them by the 21st of October, as you know. Our efforts only apply to those which will be integrated into this mechanism, the renewable energies mechanism. We informed EMRA of this issue, and companies would decide whether to be integrated with this mechanism or not, depending on the opinions of EMRA. I guess most of these companies already applied for this mechanism. I hope subsidies, support for domestic products will effectively continue this year. As you know, there are power plants which have been installed and which have been operated with license. Similarly, these companies will have to apply the transmission companies, and transmission companies will be required to send us 2 documents, both for unlicensed operations and licensed ones.
Bize gönderecekler bu belgeleri. 2 belge istiyoruz. Hem lisanslı kapsamında hem lisanssız kapsamında.
One is a certificate confirming that the product is completely manufactured on domestic terms. This certificate should be stamped by the head of the relevant industrial chambers of the area.
Bu belgenin ilgili fabrikanın kurulduğu olduğu bölgenin Sanayi ve Ticaret Odası tarafından da onaylanmasını istiyoruz.
Except misunderstandings, we didn't go through a lot of problems here.
Bunu almakta çok zorlanan görmedik.
Another document is a certification that shows compliance with national and international standards.
2012 yılındaki revizyon
As you all know, the products of these power plants are quite sophisticated and unique in their own terms, so it was almost impossible for them to produce some compliance documents. That's why we worked in collaboration with Turkish Standards Institute and had them release a certificate. For hydroelectric plants, we accept this document as well, the compliance of this criteria prepared by Turkish Standards Institute.
o kritere uygunluğunu da kabul ediyoruz.
Similarly, for wind power plants, we also accept type certificates issued by any accredited institutions,
Sertifikasını
plus the confirmation from the Turkish manufacturer
ilgili üretici firmadan
for this type certificate.
bir parçanın kanatsa bu o tip sertifikası, o numaralı tip sertifikasının uygunluğunu onaylamasını istiyoruz. Bu sayede bu sene işledik.
We are expecting these certificates from unlicensed operators as well. The term certificate has a broad meaning.
Çok geniş
In brief, the certificate should show that your manufactured products should be in compliance with the national and international standards, and this can be issued by either a national or an international accredited institution. Manufacturers are first recommended to complete this certification process if it's lacking.
ama hep diyoruz ki gelenlere sertifika
The issue of certificates will also be experienced for solar power plants.
Güneşte de benzer sorunlar yaşanacak. Güneş tabii ki belki bu oturumun konusu değil ama sertifika konusu belki orada da karşımıza çıkacak.
Konusunda biraz özür dilerim. Mesela TSD alınan yerli üretimle alakalı TSD'den alınan bir belge de geçerli olacak mı?
There are some institutions who don't have the authority to confirm these certificates or to issue these certificates. We would like to support them
Beraber çalışıyoruz.
in terms of their laboratory environments and so on.
Olması sebebiyle onlarla beraber çalışıyoruz. Bunların almaları gerektiği, neticede onlar da bir laboratuvarlar kurmaları lazım. Bunlar da ekonomisini düşünüyorlar. Kurarsak ne kadar gelecek falan.
We received some complaints at the Parliamentary Commission which were regarding the fake domestic products. They were basically just repainted and purchased from abroad but were presented as though they were domestic products. We should really avoid being a country where Europe takes advantage of these kinds of situations. I also think that we should definitely embark upon an accepted national certification authority. Let me note that down.
Biz de ilk
Yes, we are supporting domestic manufacture, but in terms of certification, we are in a way encouraging our manufacturers to rush to international accreditation institutions. I know that. We wanted to facilitate this process and we allowed the manufacturers to show documents confirmed by Turkish Standards Institute, even though it's not accredited.
Uluslararası normlara aykırı bir durum bu. Yani akreditasyon çünkü her şeyde şart aranıyor ama biz TSE'ye verebiliyorsak kabul edeceğiz bunu.
ATS akreditasyonunu tamamlasın yani.
Tabii.
Bir şey.
Evet.
These are technical insufficiencies, But there is one thing that's a big challenge for us. This has given us a headache even before the regulation. According to Brussels, and they are somehow right, what we are doing with subsidies are contradictory with our customs union agreement. For them, we have a customs union agreement. That's why we are not supposed to treat Germany differently from Turkey. This has been a political preference.
Yapamazsın diyorlar. İşte onunla ilgili kanunları çevirdik, inceledik. Yani bir haklılık payları var. Ama bu siyasi bir tercih oldu. Bakanımıza kadar gitti bu konu.
We'll see what happens. There are some examples, for example, from China and Canada. The verdict was against Canada, but they also implemented the same thing. This is our approach as well. We will just try our best and implement it as long as possible. We consider renewables is an area which should be exempt from these kinds of agreements.
Bu tür şeylerden muaf tutulması gereken bir konu olarak görüyoruz. Yani çünkü yenilenebilir. Hani eskiden bir sıfat daha konulurdu. Yerli ve yenilenebilir denildi. Yani
This is completely a different area, because renewables is our key to reduce our dependency on foreign countries.
önemli argümanlarından biri. Bu konuda onlara yerli üretim konusunda şans tanımak, başka konularla aynı şey. Yani alkol üretimi konusunda böyle bir sınır bununla aynı değil. Çünkü aynı mevzuat dışında bahsediyorlar bize. Bizden önce tekel yetkililerini sorguya tabi tutuyorlar. Viskiyi niye şöyle yaptım bilmem.
What are we supposed to encourage if we are not supposed to encourage domestic renewable energies? Why would we just order an 80 meter long blade from Germany?
Ya bu oradan çıkıyor bakın. Karbon hesabı yaparken diyoruz ki o zaman karbon hesabı yaparken bunu da hesaplamanız lazım.
Evet.
3 tane kanat Almanya'dan gemiye bindiriliyor buraya geliyor. Bu adama oradan ceza vermeniz lazım.
Hocamın bir şey... Arkadaşlar bize bir mikrofon daha, bize çok mikrofon lazım aslında. Size söyleyeyim. Var mı mikrofonumuz? Teknik arkadaş. Evet, buradan. Evet hocam.
Efendim şimdi bu
Europeans are unfair because even they, for 25 years, have been supporting and encouraging solar and wind energy with subsidies. Even
25 sene verdiler, işini gördükler, biz devreye girince bunu yapıyorlar. Onun için burayı siyaset aşar. Kendileri yaptı.
for automotive industry, they allowed us 20 years so that we could use all our domestic contributions.
Rekabetçi olabiliriz.
And Germany even subsidized 3 times higher than us in terms of solar.
Alıyorsa 45 sent verdi, 3 misline verdi güneşte ve vurdurma gelmesi için. Bu itibarla bunun cevapları var. Bir. İkincisi raylı taşlı sistemler.
They also objected to the 50% contribution that we implemented for the tender relating to railway systems in Ankara. They should require these things from us after we close chapters, right? We are not even a member of the EU.
Fasılları açsınlar.
Kaldık biz daha Avrupa Birliği'ne tam girmedik.
Evet, yani fasılları bir açsınlar. Bir de şu var, yani bizde
We are not exempting foreign investors who are manufacturing within Turkey.
herhangi bir Avrupa firmasına veya
If they manufacture in Turkey again, they enjoy the same rights.
ifade ediyor. Yani o yatırımcıyı bundan muaf tutmuyoruz. Gelip tesisini eğer Anadolu'da kuruyorsa, Türkiye'de kuruyorsa buradaki benim firmamla aynı haklara, imalatı burada yapmak kaydıyla aynı haklara sahip oluyor. Evet.
This practice applies for 5 years to each plant, energy plant. So you can benefit from this subsidy for 5 years. And this is applicable to the power plants which will be commissioned by 2015. We are almost in 2014, so we only have a year.
faydalanabilecek idiniz. Hala da
Our aim is to postpone the process, like the benefiting period from the subsidies should be extended, we think. That's why I was late here today, actually, because I was in the meeting which was relating to this issue. Now it's waiting for the approval from the Council of Ministers.
Bakanlar Kurulu kararı. Ama ben bu şeyin üzerinde çok durmak istiyorum.
Domestic production is something very important for us, and we highlight this interest anywhere, even when we are invited to the congresses held in EU or UN meetings. We again highlight the issue.
İşlenmesi gereken bir konu. Yani yerli üretim burada açıkçası şunu belirtmek lazım.
More than a decade ago, when I saw for the first time a wind turbine, I was so excited. But I'm not as excited as I was in the past. This is the same for solar energy plants. But what makes me excited is some more different energy plants. 3 years ago, Cembey wouldn't attend our Congress, but now he's here and he's a local manufacturer of wind turbines. We have passed a state in which we used to get happy just because we were generating renewables. But we are happy to be manufacturing wind turbines and solar turbines. Especially for wind power plants, we have a lot of easy implementations now, and I think our manufacturers can reach the capacity to manufacture in the country.
Bilgi alalım başkanım.
We are subsidizing those who will be commissioned by 2015,
Orada ne kadar?
and the subsidy is
Tamamını
a total of 3.17 cents, right?
şey veriyoruz.
And our purchase warrant is around 7.
Aşağı yukarı yüzde kaça geliyor? Evet, yani o civarda bir desteğe geliyor. Şimdi o
What kind of agreements did you reach while you were talking about the energy plans to be commissioned by 2015 at the ministry level? Our idea is to extend it to 2020. 2020 is not far away either. Taking into account the application period, don't you think we need to facilitate it a little bit further?
imalatla yapılmışsa 10 yıldır 10 yıl istifade edecek değil. Aslında 2020'de de, çünkü 2015 bize o zaman çok uzak gibi geliyordu. Şimdi geldik 2015'e. Şimdi 2020 de çok uzak değil, yani şurada kalmış 5-6 sene. Şimdi müracaat süresi, müracaat alma işi 3,5 sene süren bir işti zaten faaliyeti. Yani bunu böyle önüne açsak nasıl olur?
Yani o uzun yıl yapmanın efendim şu şey sakıncası çıkıyor.
I understand that 5 years look short. However, it's not.
Ne olur ne olmaz gibi bir düşünce var.
We can only extend it by 5-year periods. But isn't it possible to help every operator benefit from it for 10 years? Let me just again note this down, because I think this has a political aspect.
Almanya 30 sene
Evet.
bu teşvikleri verdi.
Hocam orada mikrofon var.
Germany has been subsidizing the same way for 30 years. It has only stopped subsidizing the solar activities a few months ago. When Germany produced systems for solar power, it subsidized these manufacturers, and then the system started to gain roots they continued like that for 30 years, and it became so frequent that even individual households were provided with these solar power installations, and then they decided to end the subsidies. And when they were ended, all these German manufacturers started to be acquired by other companies. We still haven't started subsidizing, and even before properly subsidizing, we are talking about removing it. You need to extend it. You need to follow Germany, Spain example. We are extending it by 2012. Our aim is to allow people to benefit from it for 10 years.
10 yıl alıyor olmamız. Burada ikinci bir şart getirmek, tabii bürokrat arkadaşlarımız öyle uzlaşmışlar. Ama ben bunu notuma aldım. Kendime de görev aldım. Özellikle bu birinci kısımda
I have two tasks from now on. The first is help the Turkish Standards Institute install laboratories.
Laboratuvarlarını kurup devreye girmesi ve sertifikasyon işini çözmesi lazım. Ama nasıl çözer, nasıl eder?
The second is to extend it even for a longer period instead of 2020. Subsidies are very important, but first we need to see that we can rely on our own economy. Not everything, unfortunately, can be solved by subsidies. I'm again highlighting the importance of subsidies, but I think the machinery should be self-sustainable even without the subsidies. At least it should pay its own debts in the 6th year, by the 6th year that it was manufactured. This is our focus while we are designing. Please, let's not consider the sector as if it cannot survive on its own without subsidies. We are subsidizing because we want you to be preferred. No matter what people say, we are in a competition. That's why we are trying to transform the disadvantages into advantages. Without subsidy, you get the refund from the capital in 6 years. I'm sorry, it's 8 years. But with the subsidy, you are refunded your main capital in 6 years.
Çevirmeye çalışıyor. İşte finans sektörü konuşuluyor ayrı salonlarda bile. Genelde iyi şey yapıyoruz. Şimdi
yatırımcı yapıyorsunuz. Siz teşvik aldığınız vakit bizim niteliğimiz 8 seneden 6 seneye iniyor. Biz size de zarar vereceğiz. Teşvik almazsanız 8 senede ana parayı geri alıyorsunuz. Teşvik verirseniz 6 veya 5'e iniyor. O zaman sizi de
onun için bizi tercih ediyoruz.
Karşı çıkmanın manası yok.
Onun için bizi tercih ediyoruz. Evet. Şimdi
Our second panelist is from the Union of Chambers of Turkish Engineers and Architects.
Mimarlar Mühendisler Odamızdan katılan
Zeyrin Taç.
Taç hanımefendi.
Mücahit Bey söyledi. Ben elektrik mühendisiyim. Makine Mühendisliği Enerji Komisyonu'nda rüzgar enerjisi.
I'm an electrical engineer. I'm active in the Energy Commission of our chamber. I'm going to talk about wind energy and local components.
Bu size sunacağım sunu 2013 yılı sonuna doğru düzenlenecek olan Sanayi Kongresi'nde enerji ekipmanları ve yerli üretim konulu raporun Makine Mühendisleri Odası tarafından hazırlanıyor. Benim hazırladığım rüzgar enerjisi ve yerli ekipmanlar kısmını içermekte. Bunu sunacağız şimdi. Tanımla başlayacak olursak, hepimiz biliyoruz ki
A wind turbine is a device that converts kinetic energy from the wind into electrical power. This device is called differently throughout the world. If the energy is directly used, windmill, But if the mechanical energy is converted into electrical power, then the machine is called either generator or wind.
Enerji dönüştürücü veya hava jeneratörü olarak isimler verilmiş. Bizim konumuz bu elektrik üretimi olan rüzgar türbini dediğimiz.
And I'm going to talk about the components of wind turbines, which consists of 4 parts. The first is the rotor, and it includes the blades for converting wind energy to rotational energy. The second is tower, which has a certain height and it supports the turbine. The third is a part that contains all the main components of the turbine, and it's located on the tower, meaning shaft, and the other is working for the electricity collection and distribution. The shaft is the supportive component of the turbine. It has the shape of a tube and is made of steel. Due to transport constraints, it consists of 3 or 4 parts. It is connected to the other components of a turbine with flashers and screws. The shaft base supports the shaft and distributes the loads, the voltage, to the rock or to the ground. It is mostly made of concrete enriched with steel. In our era, steel shafts are frequently used, and the hybrid shafts, like consisting of steel and concrete, are more commonly used these days. The research on the shaft is ongoing all over the world in order to install easily the shafts at the site, and the aim is to reduce the shaft's dependency on steel. The rotor consists of 4 main parts. We visited a lot of facilities which manufactured shafts made of concrete. Not completely made of concrete though, they are hybrid systems. Blades, blade roots, and the main part, which is called the hub. Blades are mostly made of an epoxy matrix. The blade root supports the blades and is made of steel. Blade angle system helps maximize the potential of wind and adjusts the angles of the blades, and it's driven by electrical drivers. The hub is a supportive point for the blade, and this accommodates the blade angle system. This is among the biggest parts of a turbine. A nacelle is a cover housing that houses all of the generating components in a wind turbine. This includes an external cover, a frame, brakes, sensors, the cooling system, electronic control systems, and power transmission system. The external cover protects the internal components of the turbine from external forces. It is mostly made of steel. The frame is actually an internal frame for the nacelle. Brakes are used to stop the machine under extreme circumstances and inclement weather. Sensors detect the wind speed and direction. Also measures the heat temperature of the running components within the turbine. The cooling system aims to cool the generator and the gearbox. The navigational system rotates the nacelle to the direction of the wind to maximize its productivity. Electrical control system records, tracks and measures the performance of the turbine. Also communicate with the other sensors.
Alt denetleyiciler ve dış taraflar arasında iletişimde sağlıyor.
Power transmission system is the most expensive part of the turbine. It has pivots in it. Turbines have two kinds of pivots, low wind pivots and high wind pivots. There are roller bearings. They are important elements for other parts of the turbines to reduce the friction. Coupling connects the gearbox to the generator. It also helps the oscillating powers to be reduced, which comes from other parts of the turbine, and it contributes significantly to the power quality. Gearbox is the heaviest part of the turbine. It adjusts the low speeds according to the high speeds needed by the system, but some turbines do not have this gearbox. Generator converts mechanical energy to electrical power, and now in the market there are three types of generators. Especially small turbines use permanent magnets, alternators. In terms of productivity and the lower weights, permanent magnet alternators are being used more rapidly, even in bigger turbines. And converter creates a voltage that can be transmitted to the grid. Another part is electricity collection system. This creates the generation of energy to the mid-voltage level. This is how you transmit the energy you generate to the transmission point, which connects to the grid.
Şebekeye bağlantı yapıp istenen seviyede şebekeye ürettiğiniz enerjiyi besliyorsunuz.
The communication system helps record, measure and track the wind turbines. It also reports the performance to the control center. It contains collection equipment, fiber cables and a control station. This is the relation of wind turbine components with raw materials. A typical wind turbine is firstly made of steel, and 90% of its weight is the steel. That's why the manufacture of wind turbines significantly contributes to the domestic economies. Blades may be made of aluminum and other composite materials, include cast iron, copper, ceramic, Teflon, rubber, carbon and other kinds of materials. How our wind turbine parts are supplied. There are original equipment manufacturers for wind turbines. Original equipment manufacturers first design a turbine, procure the main components from external sources. They gather them together, assemble them, brand them and transport them to the destinations. How do they procure these materials? They either buy it from the first or second level suppliers. These suppliers are normally general collectors who collect main components, including the leathers and glasses and so on. So 90% of a turbine is supplied by these kinds of collector companies to original turbine manufacturers. Original manufacturers buy important components such as gearbox and others directly from the producers of these materials. Here are the main suppliers of major wind turbine manufacturers in the world. So gearbox and other small materials may be supplied, may be purchased from these collector companies, but the main components, the heavy and the real components are mostly procured from the local manufacturers. Here is the cost allocation for a wind turbine with a capacity of 2 megawatts. It is very clear that 75% of the costs belong to the installation of turbines. That's why local manufacturing is so important. Our installed capacity for wind has reached 2,676 megawatts in September 2013. Original equipment manufacturers are also dominant in Turkey, with Vestas having the biggest share, which is followed by Enercom and Nordex. Today, our turbines connected to the grid have an average of 2 to 3 megawatts capacity. Let's have a look at the manufacture averages for wind power plants in Turkey. Domestic manufacture is only possible through technological know-how, human resources, and regional advantages. We can, for example, allow the transit of international companies to Turkey so that they manufacture here. Accordingly, many countries have actually created their domestic industry this way, including China, Canada and Spain. So we ensure manufacture and design of wind turbines completely in Turkey from domestic resources. Turkey has the necessary industrial skills to manufacture serious components of a wind turbine, including the electronic control systems and others. This is what the reports show to us. There were some European projects for which I was involved, and we visited many sites and production facilities, and the observation was that Turkey had such an industrial skill. The problem starts when it comes to activating or pushing these industrial skills. Wind energy industry started in Turkey first with the importing of everything from abroad. Power plant in Çeşme with a capacity of 7.2 megawatts was put in practice this way. Afterwards, some turbine blades started to be manufactured in Turkey, and this was a burgeoning of our industrial development. Thanks to new subsidies and shortened facilitated permit periods, we see that the number of brands manufacturing in Turkey is on increase. And in terms of small wind power plants, original design and manufacture process has already started. And we also have quite a lot of industrialists who manufacture raw materials for some turbine components, as well as connection parts. There are some companies which manufacture turbine shafts. Turbine blades are manufactured by Enercom and other companies. We have a lot of companies which supply middle components for turbine blades, including TWEC and others. We also have companies which manufacture the middle components and connection components for turbines, including Özgün Makina. For example, it manufactures couplings. We also have companies, some proud companies, who manufacture small wind energy plants from scratch, including Nortel and Pars Makina. What kind of steps do we need to take to encourage more domestic production? As you know, we have determined our long-term targets. For this, we need to determine short-term targets and meet the short-term demands as well. We really need to create comprehensive roadmaps relating to employment and rural development. We shouldn't also forget the carbon emissions since we signed the Kyoto protocols. We need comprehensive strategic plans for these kinds of issues, because even if we start manufacture, it's difficult for manufacturers to meet the demands in terms of raw materials due to some problems in terms of unpredictability. And we also should draw up some profiling studies for those who are interested in investing or manufacturing in this field. This is how people can understand the profile of their manufacturers. The list that I showed you here is a very small one, and I wish that it becomes even longer in the near future.
En kısa sürede çok uzun bir şekilde uzatılması ve bütün kişilerin erişebileceği bir veri tabanı şekline dönüştürülmesi.
I also hope that at least we can create a database which is accessible by the public and by everyone. Supported by all the stakeholders involved, we need to draw up a wind energy report. What kind of policies we should follow should also be followed, and we should also support those who are interested in taking part in certification process. We should also take into account the sales of these domestic productions abroad. For this, tests and certifications are required. We should either establish institutions that can confirm these kinds of certifications, or we should receive some support on our way to apply in front of internationally accredited institutions. And as you know, they really take a lot of time. The legislation should be reliable and solid in order to encourage domestic production. We should also work towards increasing the quality of raw materials which are used for local production. And policies should be developed in a way to allow us to compete with countries like China and India. Let us not forget that all these problems and complications other panelists mentions really create an obstacle against the development of our domestic production. Wind energy is a renewable. The European Commission's reports also agreed on that, depending on them. I'm referring to the reports that I read. It was clear that the renewables should be supported. Electricity generation with renewables is deeply supported by the EU. We aim to encourage and support domestic production because our biggest goal is to achieve rural development and is to create employment. Otherwise, it wouldn't be clear as to why the states should necessarily support renewables. Even the energy report issued by the European Commission was agreeing with my point. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. It was a very fruitful presentation.
Bu kadar derli toplu bir sunum olduğunu bilseydim ilk önce size söz verdim. Çok daha böyle içimizde medyadan genç arkadaşlarımız var, imalatçı arkadaşlarımız tabii bunları biliyor ama genç arkadaşlarımız ve medyadan takip eden arkadaşlarımız var. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Derli toplu bir rüzgarı, ne değildir, içinde ne var, dışında ne var, önerileriyle beraber dinledik. Tabii süremiz 4,5.
Of course, we have a time limit.
Asıl dinlememiz gereken
because we have 3 more specialists that we need to listen. The policy was about meeting all the energy demand in Turkey. It didn't matter which kind of energy it was. That's why we always supported local companies in order to reach these kinds of sophisticated technologies. The desired outcome was to have companies in the end which could sell Asia and Africa, which could manage the operations there.
Böyle bir teknolojiye kavuşalım. Yerli operasyonel firmalarımız olsun. Bir müddet sonra da o tecrübeleriyle, bilgi birikimiyle gerek Kuzey Afrika'ya gerekse Orta Doğu'ya operasyon yapabilecek, operasyon yönetebilecek bir yapıya ulaşsın diye bu tedbirleri alıyoruz. Böyle bir hedefimiz, böyle bir vizyon ortaya koymuştuk. Yani bu vizyona inanan, Türkiye'ye inanan.
I'm very happy that we have industrialists which believe in this vision. I'd like to give the floor to Associate Dr. Sedat Çelikdoğan. He is also the president of Ostim Renewable Energy Cluster. It's time to listen to those who are going through problems.
Şimdi şeye geldik, dertli kısma geldik.
Thank you for your participation and your attention that you showed to us.
Daha rahat konuştur hocam, rahat rahat. Yaka mikrofonu verelim, rahat rahat konuşun.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Zamanı böyle önemli olduğu takdirde rahatça uzatıyor. Hep bunu özlemini çekiyoruz. En önemli yerde filmi kapatıyorlar, olmuyor. Biz şimdi Türkiye'nin kendi ürettiği tasarımı ve üretimi olan NUREX anlatacağız.
I know that there is a time limit.
Şimdi devletimizin
Our government is recommending us to create new visions, and one of them is to create our energy with wind instead of importing oil and gas from other countries. The cost of our potential is $50 billion if we cannot realize this potential. But if we invest in this potential, this $50 billion will be within our country. This is how we can also reduce our dependency on foreign resources.
çok önemli. Bu bakımdan da
We are involved in certification, and Turkish Standard Institute's responsibility is to prepare the standards, not to issue certificates. If they really want to take on this responsibility of issuing certificates, they need to create units responsible for these energy plants. But still, you will need a reporting institution. All the stakeholders involved in this process are putting in significant efforts to overcome these kinds of obstacles and problems. I want to clarify any doubts when it comes to subsidies. Let me again tell you that Germany was able to achieve such a record performance because they developed the turbines for so many years and the technologies related to other renewables. It has a history of 30 years. It wasn't, of course, easy. And it was achieved thanks to subsidies. Imagine that you're willing to achieve such a potential with a $50 billion investment and you're not receiving any subsidies. You can see that your return over investment can only take place after 8 years. But if you're subsidized, you receive your return over investment after 3 or 4 years. Germany and Spain did it not for anything in return, they just wanted to improve their industries. Our wind power project has a capacity of 500 megawatts and the gross capacity is 600 megawatts. The rotor diameter is 45 meters and its activation speed is 3 to 5 seconds. This will be established in Istanbul, Terkos, and the equipment belongs to the second class. The blades are bigger there because we wanted to catch even the low speed wind. Our shaft height is 65 meters. The project was supported by TWEC. We need to say that we had to wait for 2.5 years until the project is what was accepted. The first attempts always are doomed to experience such problems. Today, TWEC supports these kinds of projects as best as it can. Turkey is now in an era of R&D. This shouldn't be underestimated. These kinds of subsidies will deeply contribute to Turkish economy. We have a project group of 5 people. These 5 people responsible for the project involved in the process of blade manufacturing. Mechatronic designs were carried out by Sabancı University's related department. Electrical systems were prepared by TWEC. Control hardware and software by İstanbul Ulaşım. Management and technology was Alstom software. We had 5 stakeholders in the project and our project group was consisting of almost 40 people. Now I'm showing you aerodynamic analysis. We had a middle class wind, which we called class 2, especially in this region. As you can see, the analysis is quite comprehensive, including the design. This is how the aerodynamical structure was created. The capacity is 500 megawatts, as I said, and the gross capacity is 600 megawatts. Rotor speeds, the number of blades and other details are given here. The number of blades are 3 and our blades are not fixed. They are controlled by the speed of the wind and they are all driven by electricity. You can see the profile of our power. It's quite obvious when we generate power, at which speed and in which angle. This is how we calculated the resilience of the system. We use special programs for these calculations thanks to the support of a team of 8 people. Here you can see the structure of the blade. I'm open to questions, by the way. We have determined load conditions and all the other details for the structural design. According to the analysis, we also strengthened some of our materials. We also measured the voltage and performed some structural tests. These tests were mostly about the tension tests on the screws that were connecting the blades to the shaft. We also performed some static tests. Unfortunately, Turkey doesn't offer opportunities. That's why we weren't able to carry out some dynamic tests. Indeed, these tests take 6 months. We also tested the resilience of the blades against lightning bolts, and we passed all these tests. We were comprehensively informed by some specialized facilities when it comes to blade manufacturing phases. We were also recommended by them about the selection of the blades, and thanks to them we painted and covered our blades, yet by another company. This is the picture of a final product without the paint. Our blades are as long as 21 meters. In order to rotate the blades, we have a propelling engine. These are driven by electricity. We also have something called planet underneath these driving engines. Some electrical engines that are at the bottom were purchased from abroad. This component is the only foreign component. All our reductors were manufactured in Turkey though. One blade is as heavy as 2 tons. So for their rotation we need an immense amount of power. That's why there are roller bearings underneath these blades. The diameter here is 135 centimeters. These were also manufactured in Turkey. And here is the hub which connects the blades. This is a critical part, the manufacture of which is quite difficult, because it also connects to the shaft, and sometimes it needs manual adjustments. That's why you can see the covers here. Now it's under casting and processing, and its weight is 3 tons. Here are detailed drawings. This is a critical and a heavy part. Here are some parts of these drawings. We also have a shaft. Its diameter is 440 millimeters. It's a long one. It's made of steel, and the steel as well as the production is domestic. The rotor shaft is wrapped with plastic. Don't think that it has scratches on it. This is a gearbox. We need the gearbox because it helps us stop the blades when the wind is so strong. Our blades are bigger in Turkey. The reason for it is the storm frequency, which is statistically observed to be taking place once in every 50 years. That's why we wanted to optimize the size of the blades depending on the speed of these storms.
150 senede bir veyahut da 50 senedir arkadaşlar hatırlayamıyorum. Kaç yıldadır bizim o fırtına?
İstatistiksel olarak 50 senedir.
50 senede bir aşırı bir şey var. 150 kilometreye çıkan bir büyük fırtına var. Ona dayansın diye mukavemet analizleri yaparsanız bu sefer kanatlarınız çok mukavemet çıkıyor. Bütün mukavemet değerleri değişiyor. Bu konuda bir optimizasyon yapmaya çalıştık. Biraz da ondan dolayı kanatlarımız büyük ve ağır çıkmıştır.
This gearbox is finished. It's a Planet gearbox and its weight is 10 tons. Our main aim was to create a design group. By the way, let me ask you the difference between national and domestic. If I import an element from abroad and if I contribute locally to it, it will be called domestic. Its proportion of domestication can be high or low. So if this proportion is 10% or 12%, we can't necessarily call it a domestic product. But for a product to be national, you need to own the design. When you purchase a design, it won't be your own product. That's why you need to prepare the design in order to brand it. Therefore, we don't have a Turkish brand in automotive industry, as all the designs belong to other people. The proportion of domestication is sometimes 70%, but still it's not national. In this project, the design completely belongs to us. We didn't receive any support from abroad. We just consulted a little bit due to an interruption that we weren't expected. The design belongs to us at a rate of 100%, and the proportion of domestications in terms of manufacturing is more than 90%.
Şimdi biz bu alternatör buradan devam edeyim.
Those parts on the slide are also quite critical parts. The gearbox is connected to a frame. One part of it is cast, the other part is weld. Here is the lighter part. That's why we use welling. When the rotational speed is high, and if it's at a height that can create risks, these brakes are automatically activated. They squeeze the system and they stop it, just like the ones that you have in your automobiles. These parts were purchased from abroad. These discs, by the way, this is a flexible rubber cover. This alternator is manufactured by Kama, which is completely a domestic product. Here there will be some casting studies for this frame. All the drawings for the last parts are completed and they are now under manufacturing process. Another part that we will buy from abroad are these skids that you see. These are rubber skids and they somehow silence the vibration. We need 4 skids here. Any kind of skid can silence the vibration, but our advantage is that it's rubber. We also want to have it manufactured here, but the price quotation was quite high and we were recommended to really buy it from abroad, which was a more economic solution. It wasn't a technological obstacle. Brake discs can also be manufactured here, but the amount we needed was very small. That's why we think that if we have more wind energy plants, we will be able to manufacture them domestically. This is the drawing of the frame, which is a very heavy one that carries all the weight. This is the complete frame and all the load is connected here. The tower, so the hub of the turbine rotates. These gears actually are the ones which rotate the nacelle. These rotate on a bed, and the diameter of this bed is 2 meters 35 centimeters, which is 100% domestic. We will receive the delivery by the end of November. We only bought the electrical engines from abroad, but all the reductors are domestic. However, all the designs belong to us. When there is a storm, we need to stop rotation. We also need to lock the blades in order to protect the turbines against the wind. Therefore, we are using these brakes that stops the hub. We have 9 brakes. We are buying them from abroad as well, but it's just because of the fact that the amount is quite low, not because we can't manufacture them. All these beds are domestic. Let me also focus on the tower. This is the tower part, the side and from above profile, and this part will be composite. This is how it's going to be connected to the blades. It's now in İzmir.
Şu anda İzmir'de Ateş Çelik'te bu imalatı bitti.
It is as long as 65 meters, and you can carry it without having to disassemble it.
Fakat bu parçaları sonra yerinde monte etmeniz gerekiyor. Bunları birbirine bağlarken monte edecek flanşlar var. Bunlar çelik. Ve bu çeliğin de dövme olması lazım.
The bottom part of the component, the diameter of it is 4 meters, and we need to use special techniques for it. Now we are trying to eliminate all the problems related to the casting of it and the welling side of the application. For these kinds of projects, we need to create more facilities when it comes to welding. When these flanges are welded, the tower will be activated as well. We started the foundational construction works for our wind turbine. Here, the capacity will be 500 megawatts, and here there will be a capacity of 2,500 megawatts. I mean kilowatts, not megawatts. Then we will start the assembly. In the upcoming months, for example in next May or June, it will start rotating. It's impossible for us to work in February because it will be winter season, but still we will carry out the groundworks. We will first install the component called nacelle. This is how you actually erect the turbine. Our project started 2 years ago.
Bizim projemiz şu anda 2 seneyi doldurdu. TÜBİTAK'ın projenin karar vermesi için
It took 3 years for TÜBİTAK to accept our project, but now the process is quite fast. The documentation and convincing process were really long.
projenin doküman hazırlar, hakemlere git, değiştir, onu götür, bunu götür, 3 sene sürdü. 2 senedir bir 6 ay uzatma istedik. Aslında
Our design team is quite new. The main aim of this project is to bring up a team of designers. Also create a supplementary industry.
tüm sanayi oluşturması çok önemli. Şimdi biz mesela burada gidiyoruz, yapıyoruz. 2500 kilometre gelince bizim dişli kurusu olacak 30 ton.
If we can actually get to enjoy the subsidies, the domestic industrialists will be able to purchase the necessary equipment. But it's impossible to establish these kinds of workshops or working ateliers only for a couple of parts. Once we achieve a speed of 2,500 kilowatts, we will need even bigger workshops. We will increase the height of the tower up to 90 meters, and we will carry 120 tons there. Our steel is completely local. Our casting specialists are actually exporting to Europe. But there are still some jobs which require sophistication and utmost care. For bigger proportions of parts, you need to have bigger facilities. And for a market which can bring with it $50 billion, all these efforts should be carried out.
Size dinleyenler olarak ne söyleyebiliriz? Yetmez ama bir alkış alabiliriz.
Can we please applaud our speaker? I can really see that you are a young person. You're quite excited about what you're doing.
Yaşadık. Oradan bir arkadaşımız, genç bir arkadaşımız bir soru sormak istiyor. Ona da söz vermiştim.
Kanat tasarımında
Ayağa kalkarsanız biz de daha net göreceğiz. Biraz
kanadın aerodinamik verilerini testlerin Türkiye'de mi yapıldı ya da yapıldı mı yoksa CFD çözümüyle mi? Kanadın aerodinamik verileri.
Laboratuvar yetmezliğiniz var değil mi?
Rüzgar
Yoksa-
tünelinden girmedik 500 kilowatt.
Nasıl?
Sorulan eğer kesitlerin rüzgar tünelinde doğrulanması.
Evet, rüzgar tünelinde.
Kesitler CFD analizinde ve elimizde olan database'lerle doğrulandı. Bir de özel olarak
The cross sections were prepared on a special software. Wind turbine is something quite challenging. This is quite different from manufacturing a plane actually, because it also requires a construction process. And you're always supposed to transmit a proper amount and proper quality of electricity to the grid. Entire domestic production, of course, will cost us some time. But we will need to perform some tests. We can test our converters. But in order to test the aerodynamical features of the blades, we need special laboratories. There is a laboratory at Middle East Technical University, but our blades are so big that the laboratory there cannot accommodate them. This means that we can only open ourselves up to the global market after we complete all our insufficiencies. We only have 30 minutes left This year the hall is full. Compared to the other years, this is an immense amount of progress.
Salon doldu. Tahmin ediyorum bir dahaki sene öbür tarafa gideceğiz. Birçok rüzgar çöpüresi çıkacaktır.
Hocam onu aramızda konuşalım. Benim bereketim mi, senin bereketin mi ona bakacağız. Bir soru daha var. Hocam otursun, siz buyurun. Bir soru daha var, onu da alalım.
Teşekkürler. Ben
How did you design the operation process? Because it looks like you didn't perform a test on exhaustion. We analyzed the exhaustion levels of blades, but we couldn't perform tests on it. But there were exhaustion tests on a certain scales, but in terms of certification we didn't perform a full-scale fatigue test. That's how we were able to validate a 20-year of life cycle. When we see the age group that our audience and our guests here who ask questions, it is quite certain that the future of manufacturing in this field is more than promising. Now the floor is Cem Yalçın's from Nortel Energy as an investor. Well, we've been in this field for a decade now, and we are active in the design and manufacture of turbine. I'm here talking with you today as a person who has achieved quite a lot of projects in terms of installed capacity and in terms of other fields. All the technical data has already been mentioned by all our senior panelists. We are using the products of local manufacturers. That's why I'm just going to give a presentations. What is our manufacturing process and what do we manufacture? And how domestic are we? Our design team includes almost 20 to 30 people, and we have achieved this status by spending a lot of time, 4 or 5 years, and 10 million Turkish liras in our facilities in Ayvalık. This was an adventure. Why would you spend 10 million Turkish lira in Turkey? Especially, why would you invest such an amount in R&D? But we had hopes and we had belief. Also, we loved our country. Today, in the States, we have a turbine that's working in the class of 30 kilowatts, which we connected to the grid in 2009. Let me tell you the manufacturing process. Nortel Energy started its journey in 1999. 3D designs are not easy to conduct. They require experience and technical know-how, and our team has been working for 10 years on this. You create human resources within your company, and you need to maintain it. In the design process, we shared all our problems and concerns with other stakeholders. And 2015 projections would be impossible if we hadn't been working this hard. We had some meetings with Lloyd Foundation regarding the certification process in Turkey, and they are assessing us according to 700 criteria, and our collaboration is ongoing because they have been accredited. Thankfully, we are in parallel with the international standards now. We have also been certified by other institutions like ISO. We boast the skills and the infrastructure which can produce 500 megawatts. We have the infrastructure to be able to design 500 kilowatts. 250 megawatts are being realized in Aegean region right now. It's important to work hand in hand with R&D activities. We are able to procure 2,600 parts from the internal market, while the R&D unit is able to perform tests and carry out all the other activities. And all the activities should be in parallel with each other, including our R&D activities, including our other activities. We have some machinery that's actively sold within the internal market, and I believe that we will have other exemplary companies like us in Turkey, which will deeply contribute to our economy. I agree with the fact that in the past we were only talking to a few people, but now this hall is full with people. We are ready to sell remarkable capacities, and we will rely on our power which comes from R&D activities. Certification is an area that needs some mention. We are conducting some activities in the United States. We worked a lot to strengthen the belief in the industry. Let's just strip off from this feeling that's like, oh, I don't think we can do it, I don't think we can deal with it. We were a little bit relentless. Even before the permits to access the grid, wind turbines got to connect to the grid. When we were asked how we managed it, we just had to confess that it was unregistered. Even though we completed and carried out any required necessity. But the General Director for Renewable Energy and our esteemed Minister, we were able to conduct quite healthy discussions. Its result was the law for renewable energy. Now we are able to receive connection permits within 50 or 60 days only. We are really grateful for the supportive nature that came from the senior authorities. Instead of closing the doors against our faces, they really helped us. This was a relief for all of us, both for the users and for other stakeholders. There is not a difference between installment of a There is no difference between the installment of a 250 kilowatt turbine and 1 or 2 kilowatt turbine. Even if we achieve higher figures, Turkey will be able to create an infrastructure for smaller turbines. And as soon as the problems were voiced properly and as soon as they were found out, the government really helped a lot to open up the way for us. The TWEC supported us in terms of composite materials. It has the ability to manufacture composite materials at European standards. And thanks to TWEC, we didn't waste any time when we were lost on our way about where to get the materials or where to procure them. They have perfect analysis, including blade analysis and other materials analysis. We also started working with Rüzgam. The blade profiles are confirmed profiles. We also created a model which is related to the lower speeds, which is called the subsegments. All the materials you see here were manufactured in Turkey, including the top part, the rotating part. And we are outsourcing almost from 10 companies. We also mentioned that it's almost impossible to accommodate our big parts in small workshops. You can see here the wind speed is 2.5 and the generation is at 6 to 8 kilowatts. And our aim is to optimize our productivity even at low wind. You can have a look on the internet and see what kind of machinery we have within the system. We produced the machinery that we needed and we have the required technology. And we are ready to share our know-how and this experience with any kind of stakeholders. Thank you for your attention. It was a pleasure for us to be able to introduce ourselves. In Turkey, we have people who first get to dream and then believe that they can do it. But there are also some other people who think they will never achieve anything. And the other type of people is those who take advantage of everything. Investors are always faced with these kinds of social criticisms. Nobody first believes in them, then they start to believe and support our investors, but some of them still continue saying that our investors are just taking advantage without seeing any of the painful processes and the challenges that our investors faced. Let me congratulate this crazy man and this crazy company. Let us listen to our other panelists and to listen to his experiences. We should give the floor to him. I'm going to take it short. We have been trying to manufacture turbines for 40 years. We were established in 1973, so we are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. Our first manufacture was in 1976, but we started manufacturing epoxy raw materials in 1983. This epoxy manufacture was thanks to the license of a company, and when it was cancelled, we started to manufacture epoxy materials as of 1998. Our brand was born in the 80s, TWEC. Why TWEC? Because we are among the very rare companies which can produce the final product and the raw material. So while we are manufacturing the final product, we can even go into the manufacture of raw materials. We are manufacturing quite a lot of raw materials and products for a wide range of industries. We also manufacture some products which are completely related to wind energy plants. Our factory is located in Gebze Organized Industrial Zone. The blade is a composite material. Composite means the combination of at least two materials. So it's more superior than other combinations. For blades, we sometimes use glass fiber or carbon fiber. They are transmission-related materials. Also, they are combined thanks to epoxy resins. Or they can also be strengthened with foams, PVC foams, with the purposes of increasing the rigidity. When these two materials are gathered together, a reaction starts. Before the reaction reaches a certain status, the lamination process, so the sticking process, should be completed. Then comes the etching process. Epoxy materials are mostly used while sticking two materials to each other. One of the most important components in composite blade production is the fiber. Because with the epoxy model, with the fiber model, you stick the material on the blade, and after the etching procedure, the fibers get to the form of this model that you created. We've been employing a lot of methods, including infusion. These methods matter in that depending on these methods, different epoxy systems are preferred. Hand layup is the most preferred method. This means the laying of dry fiber manually and wetting it in the resin. During infusion, there is a video. We again have a model, and it's laid up on the outer skin. These are all dry processes. Then we add the foam material on it. There is not an epoxy here, as you see, yet though. Then we lay the fibers as the inner layers. Then some feeding and vacuuming lines are laid down. The entire system is covered until a plastic cover. It's very important for the bag to be escape proof, because we are aiming a vacuum here, and the place emptied out from the vacuum is replaced by the epoxy. This is what we call vacuum infusion. This method is used by major companies. You can see that the structure here is being wetted with epoxy, and this is how the component is manufactured. Materials during the manufacturing of these components should be specific materials. They should also be certified by some international institutions. All our materials are certified by the Lloyd Institute. Here are some real practices carrying out the vacuum infusion method. Here is the additional procedures with the resin. This conclusion can be the summary of my presentation. Thanks to the domestic materials manufactured in Turkey, we can manufacture, again, domestic turbines, blades for turbines. The arguments from foreign manufacturers are revolving around the fact that all these components are brought to the country, and this somehow means a national product. As you know, we are trying to, the economy is trying to encourage completely domestic manufacture of automobiles, and the reason for that is to localize the components of automotive industry. And when we look at wind energy, the goal for 2023 is 2,000 megawatts of energy. Let's say 10,000 megawatts, and for this figure we need an investment of $10 billion. Which portion of this $10 billion investment will stay within the country? That's why we really think that we need to support the sub-industry, increase the employment and maximize the productivity. Thank you, that was all. TWEC was going through such an excitement for 40 years, and of course they are quite willing to support those who are as excited as they are. You mentioned epoxy materials, and you said that the combination of two materials was required for composite structures. I'm wondering if the raw material for the composites is manufactured in Turkey. Epoxy consists of two components called resin and a strengthening material. We are producing the raw materials for the strengthening component. For the other parts we need to import from foreign countries. But this is not the case in Turkey only, this is the case all over the world. There are some raw materials which are only produced in 2 or 3 countries. It doesn't matter if you're in Turkey, in the States or in Japan. You need to procure these raw materials that I mentioned from abroad. We are discussing about how to improve the chemistry industry in Turkey throughout the meetings that are held by the Chamber of Chemists. This question somehow relates to these meetings. I wish one of them was here from the chamber. Many thanks to you all for your attention and for your patience. You really fill these halls, and I see that our young friends are really following this session with great interest. One of our goals for 2023 is $500 billion of exports. Our conventional existing technologies will only help us achieve an export amount of $250 billion. If we cannot localize the periods of innovation, discovery, patent applications, and branding, it's impossible to reach our target. That's why we are deeply supporting R&D activities. I hope Turkey improves even better thanks to the surprises and thanks to these crazy people that I mentioned. I know that all these conclusion-oriented projects are taken seriously even at the Prime Minister level throughout our meetings. Let's consider Turkey as a shop, and our income is only $130 billion, and we are really doing a lot even with such an amount of income. But the world will be amazed by us if we achieve this target of $500 billion. Thank you all for your excitement and for your attention. Let me please applaud you.